So one chapter that I absolutely loved and I want to talk to you more about is freeing the inner critic from self-concern to self-cultivation. Because our audience is people who are self-employed creators. And often we've just struck out on our own. You mentioned this phrase, humble inquiry, in this chapter that really stuck with me, in that the criticism that we hear in our mind for striking out on our own path or doing something that's not conventional, and learning how to differentiate what is a constructive, I guess you could call criticism, versus just this empty chatter that's holding us back and breaking us and keeping us small, like learning to inquire between those two and be aware of that. Could you help us with this?
So the simplest way for me to differentiate is there's constructive criticism or helpful criticism is criticism that doesn't become cruel and judgmental and punishing. There's a voice in us that is helpful to say, you could do better. Like, what could you work to improve? What can you put in as good effort? And okay, so you made a mistake there, but let's just look at the situation, assess it, make a better decision, and move on. Right? The inner critic's voice would say, you always mess up. You're never prepared enough. You make these mistakes again and again. You're never going to change. You don't have this in you. You should have never started this project. You should get a different job. It undermines the goodness of our work. It's cruel. It's really harsh and prickly. Yeah, and it sabotages our good efforts. Yeah, that's the critic's voice.
Yes. And you talk about invoking a protector.
Yes.
I love this so much. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah. So in Buddha, in the Buddha's sort of telling of it, or the stories of the Buddha's awakening, there's this demon Mara who is constantly going after the Buddha and tempting him with greed, hatred, delusion, desire, and doubt. Right, and the Buddha constantly kind of deflects the desire and deflects the aversion and anger and all of these things. But doubt is the one that he's really unable to deflect effectively. And even on the night of his awakening, he's like about to get awakened, and Mara comes back and basically says, Buddha, you don't really have this in you, do you? Right? He plants the seed of doubt. And so the Buddha, recognizing that this is a really insidious form of sabotage, he needs more than just his own resources. And he bends down, he touches the earth with the hand. It's called like Bhumi Mudra or something like that. And he says, he calls on the earth goddess as his witness, and he says, I belong here. Right? And then Mara goes, oh, and slinks away. And so we sometimes need a protector. We need something stronger than ourselves to overcome the viciousness and sort of the daggers of doubt.
Yes.
And in Tibetan iconography, you have Mahakala, who is this fanged, fierce, sword wielding, and stands in a circle of flames, demigod, who's really kind of badass looking, and he's holding a sword basically to cut through the head of judgment, slash it off.
Wow.
And so the Tibetans look at Mahakala as their protector. Like, they invoke someone so fierce like that to banish Mara. And excuse my language, but basically it's like, fuck off, Mara. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. And because doubt and the inner critic is so strong, you'll never win an argument against it. It'll always say, but, and
yes,
it always get under you. And so you just have to say, you have to be really strong, and you have to either get this protector like Mahakala, or one example I heard that I love is Gandalf the Great. Right? Like, stop, and Belzog is there, and Balzog, the demon, and he uses his staff, and he basically says, puts it in the ground, breaks the bridge, says, thou shalt not pass. Right? And for me, my protector is my dad.
Yeah, that's what reminded me of this, is when you mentioned him. in your story. Like, what would my dad do? But yeah, amazing.
Yeah, my dad, I was very fortunate, and I know not everyone has a parent, especially as a protector, but I just had this beautiful relationship with my father where I knew, sort of especially toward the end of his life, like I understood that all he really wanted was for me to be happy. And there was this love that we had. And he is the one I call to stand in between myself and Mara, or the critic in doubt. And when he's in front of me, in between myself and Mara, then I multiply him, and he circles me, and I'm protecting all sides. And I stand in the center of that circle, and I just feel safe. And I feel like actually I can look at Mara from the circle, outside of the circle of my father, and I look at Mara and I can feel very kind of compassionate for Mara, right? To feel doubt and that kind of ugliness of being critical and undermining and harsh doesn't feel good. And actually, it's a really sad feeling to have, especially if we turn it towards ourselves. So, my protector is my dad. I remember one time I was on a workshop and one woman said her protector is Tina Turner.
What's love got to do? Sorry, that's my bad attempt at singing, but that is hilarious. That is powerful. Oh my God, Tina Turner with that hair and like her hands stuck up. Ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
What an image of like infinite versions of your father surrounding you in a circle and protecting you. What really strikes me about that story is you share this story in the book about how for many years you strove for your dad's approval, right? Mm-hmm. And that you were a photojournalist, and they loved that, I guess, or they approved of that. But you felt that they wouldn't introduce you as Mimi the yoga teacher. Right. And you felt the pain of that until one day, your dad said, yeah, like, I'm happy that you're happy. Because I know you've been through the valleys of that with your previous work, and maybe even still now. What encouragement could you give, people that are working on their own and trying to do their best work? But yeah, that inner critic, the voice is loud. They're usually doing something that's not quite conventional or known.
Yeah.
And they're dealing with a lot of gray, right? They're dealing with a lot of gray about what they value, what's important to them, what society values, what their dad or mom or families value. Yeah, I just love to end our conversation on that.
I think a word that you said, or something that I'd written, humble inquiry, is really good to challenge the validity. Are they actually true? Is what they're doing actually something that others are disapproving of? And if so, is that a valid disapproval, or is it just something that they hold to be true and is not actually true for yourself? And so much of our critic comes from our familial and societal imposed views from our families and society. So it's a really healthy inquiry to challenge whether those are actually true. What do we believe? What do you believe? And you probably will believe something quite different, which is why you're an entrepreneur, and why you're self-employed, like why you're sort of stepping out in a direction that is going against the stream of conventional ideas and work. And to also recognize, one of my teachers, Martin, says this a lot, to recognize the goodness of your practice, to recognize the goodness of what you're doing, and to really affirm that the work that you're doing is contributing something positive. And to keep sight on that. And then thirdly, fuck off, Mara. Touch the ground.
Touch the ground.
I say this to my students a lot. And new teachers who are stepping into a class for the first time and nervous, I say, just touch the ground and say to yourself, like you really mean it, I belong here.
Yes.
Because the inner critic is basically telling us that we don't have a right to be here, and we don't belong here, and that we're doing something wrong, which is being questioned by family or society or whomever or ourselves, right? And that we have every right to be here. This is our earth, this is our home, the earth. So, yeah, those strategies are really, I found them really helpful. You know, when they actually work, and usually they do, it feels like there's a sincerity that can flower and bloom again. You know, this is the right place. This is where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's legitimate.
Mm.